Thank you very much for your kind introduction. I'm delighted to join you here today because I think that we need the values and the spirit of this movement more than ever. And I'm also delighted to see so many councillors in the room. When I tell people that I'm a councillor, a councillor, they're always like, wow, that's amazing. You do such brilliant work. And I realise quite quickly that they think that I'm a therapist, and I have to be like, oh, sorry, not that kind of councillor. I'm a Labour councillor, and I can see them start to kind of back away in horror. Or they talk to me about dog mess, which, as all my councillor colleagues will know, is a big and important. But it isn't all that we do as local authorities. We step in when everything else falls apart for families and individuals, and we've been doing that more than ever over the last few years. I was elected in 2010, and since then, as councillors, we've been on the front line of austerity, and we've seen the impact of the slashing of our budgets. We've lost half of our budget in Camden, and you see that every week. I see that in my council surgery when people come to me facing homelessness, facing overcrowding, unable to pay their debts. People who are young people, pensioners, it's impacting every part of the community. And I think we're increasingly seeing the triple whammy of cuts to local authorities, cuts to our public sector partners, and the pressure on the police and the NHS are as bad as I've ever seen it. And also individuals as they face the changes to benefits. And just as demand increases, we have less resource to be able to support people. So we have to do things differently. Unless we as Labour councillors are just going to be proceeding over the gradual withdrawal of services. I think, but it goes well beyond just the cuts. I think that the inequalities that we're seeing in our communities, and particularly in a borough like Camden in the heart of London, so deep that they not only threaten social justice aims, but also cohesion. And I think that the way that our communities are fracturing in the wake of Brexit is a real concern for us as politicians, but a deep concern for our communities. And I spent a couple of years going around the country talking to young people in all sorts of different communities. And I learned a lot in that experience about One Direction and the Illuminati. But I also learned a huge amount about social change and creativity and passion, which was all of it going on outside of formal political institutions. Young people were doing some amazing things, but by and large, they've lost faith with traditional political institutions, and even those which are based on our values, cooperative values. And I remember a conversation in the Welsh Valleys, which is very much for me, somewhere I looked up to as a place of solidarity. And talking to young people there, some of them hadn't heard of the trade union movement, but many of them were saying that there was nothing in it for them in terms of collective power. They felt that. I remember one young man said, we'll all march up the hill together, but there's only one job at the end, and then it's everyone for themselves again. And to be in a position where young people feel that they have to compete for resource, for jobs, is deeply distressing. And I think there's a great deal of individuality with young people, which can be a really positive thing. They're more respectful of differences, more liberal. But I think if there's not opportunity at the end of that individuality can become competitive and destructive. And it's really up to us as a society to shape that and to create ways that bring communities together, that respects that individuality. And I think that the part of that fracture I was talking about are the lack of spaces where different generations come together. And on that journey around the country, I remember a young man in Glasgow who described what happened when he tried to help an elderly woman cross the road, only to kind of find himself set upon by her walking stick. And he said that she used language he'd never heard before. But he didn't blame her. And, she's seeing the next generation through a media lens, because outside of her family, there aren't places that she's coming together with people from generations. But the impact of that is young man might not days they're selfish, they don't try and help. So it's something that we need to combat, because our debate, whether it's in the media or social media, our political debate is increasingly losing its humanity. and so much kind of destructive and divisive messages out there. And I remember talking to the Muslim community in Camden about the rise in hate crime, and women were telling me that as there's a spike in media coverage of terrorism about and focused on the Muslim community, they see abuse, physical and verbal attacks in Camden. And Camden is a place where we're so proud of our diversity, but this is happening within our communities. All of this is lack of trust and how there was a 19% difference from people from the lower socioeconomic backgrounds in terms of trust in institutions and those in the highest. And that trust, lack of trust, really manifests itself. It manifests itself in communities where somebody might not try and go into a flat share and might not engage in some of the new opportunities out there, but it manifests itself in political decision making because people won't come forward because they think it's set up against them. And those voices really lost and people aren't heard. And I've seen it really viscerally in the fire safety debate, and there's nothing like the fear of tenants who live in a high rise with a post Grenfell and what that feels like. But that lack of trust kind of pervades so much of our society, and I think we need to change that and find a way to come together. And I think even when we had more resource, we weren't really fundamentally solving some of the challenges we face. So we've had a 10-year life expectancy difference in Camden from one side of the borough to the other for as long as I can remember. I went to a fantastic comprehensive school in Camden, but so many of the women that I went to school with, their outcomes were determined by their background and not by their talent. So these have been long-term issues. So we do need to do things differently. I think we as local government need to be community organisers. We need to be relationship builders. We need to be anchors of place. We need to be convening our communities and the state not disappearing and stepping out of delivering change, but being at the heart of our community and a community movement. And we've been trying to do that in Camden over the last year. We've had a massive Camden conversation that we call Camden 2025, which we've had community researchers out talking to people from their communities. We've had a citizens assembly, which is a representative group of Camden residents. And we've been talking about what Camden means. And I remember somebody from the opposition kept saying to me, why are you banging on about Camden? It doesn't, it's only politicians that think about their borough. It's not the community. But I felt growing up in Camden that it meant something to me. And actually what's come out of that conversation is it really does mean something to people where they live. I remember talking to some young men from the Somali community, and they said that they had a multifaceted identity. They felt British, European, Muslim, London, but first and foremost, they felt Camden because of the diversity of our community, because of what it means. And people who had just moved in a few months ago and people who'd lived there their whole lives wanted to be part of improving it. And 80% of people who we spoke to said they wanted to work with their neighbours to make their community a better place. And that is a really, really powerful resource, I think, for change. So the plan we put forward for the council is one which is a community-led vision, and it's a call to action on a number of areas that the community have identified as important. So social isolation, housing, employment, youth safety, air quality. And we are saying this is what we as a council can deliver, and this is the challenge, and what can you bring forward, and what do you want to contribute, whether you're a university, a business, or a citizen. And that's already creating really powerful conversations. Just a few weeks ago, I was at a social isolation workshop organised by Central St Martin's, who are bringing their design thinking to solving social issues. And it was people from the voluntary sector, citizens, doctors, all in a room discussing what we do about social isolation. And that as a challenge is one that's about friendship and connection and even love, which are not the traditional domains of local government, more on the dog mess. And I think that actually we, in that respect need to, we need to be there in the conversation, but step back and allow people from the community who are experts in those areas to take the lead in those conversations. And this is a different way of working that we're trying to embed in everything we do. And I think one of the most powerful manifestations of that is around what we call family group conferencing, which is what we do with our most vulnerable children and adults. And it's about people who are experts, our staff, working with a network around a family, a young person who's at risk of coming into care, an adult that's very vulnerable, the network, the community, the neighbours, anyone who's important in their life. And they work with them over a number of months to think about together, how they best support that individual or that child. And it all builds up to a conference where the professionals get out of the way and the family negotiate what they're going to do together with all that support and work. And it's been hugely successful in keeping young people out of care and making sure that they stay safe. And in building on the strengths that we do have within our families and communities, and often those who use our services the most as local authorities, are those who feel the least empowered. And actually, it's about turning it on its head and building on those strengths. And so that's a very individual example, but if going back up to our school system, and in Camden, we're really proud to have schools who feel that they're part of what we call a family of schools, who are taking a collaborative approach when we're being driven to competition by the government, very much based in our communities and felt under threat by the forced academisation agenda. Our schools have chosen to stay with the local authority and part of this family of schools. So we set up something called Camden Learning, which is owned by our schools and the council together. It has leadership from parents, teachers, and from the council. And that is embedding that really cooperative approach. And it's protecting the values that we think are important and that we want to pass on to the next generation. And I could go on and on about all the different examples of what we're trying to do. But I think we're really on a journey, and we want to do things differently. We want to learn from others who are trying this. And I can see lots of people in this room who are doing this work. But I think it's about putting people at the heart of decisions. It's investing in relationships. It's allowing our frontline staff to have the power to go out and really build those relationships and work with people to be authors of their own destiny, to do what they want to do in the community. And today is about kind of being the difference and being the change. And I feel like the change is already happening out there in our communities, and it's for us as elected leaders to dive in and support it. So thank you very much.